I moved to a small town in Michigan yesterday. It's somewhat quiet here, or at least, I thought it was. Things have changed pretty quickly, and I'm not sure why. I think it started when I arrived. I had just finished installing the oven when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find two women standing on my porch. "Hi," one of them said with a beaming smile. "I'm Cynthia, and this is my wife, Carol." She gestured to the redhead beside her. "We're your neighbors." Cynthia extended a hand. I eyed it, unused to people this welcoming. When I slid my hand into her own, she shook it vigorously and then handed it off to her wife. I said. "Hi, I'm Gabriel." "What brings you to our little town?" Carol asked cheerfully. "I just saw there was a house for sale, so I bought it." I don't know why, but Carol and Cynthia burst out laughing when I said that. My eyebrows pinched together over the bridge of my nose, confused. "What's so funny?" "Well," Cynthia said, "I suppose that's as good as a reason as any. Have you been around the town lately? Oh, you just have to see the park." Cynthia peered into the house, and then her mouth fell open. "Oh, did we interrupt you while you were unpacking? I'm so sorry. Well, we'll just leave you be and come by tomorrow. Sound good?" "Yeah," I answered non-committally. "Sounds good." "Great," Carol said, slapping her hands together. "Have a good day. Oh, but before we leave, there's something that you need to know." The beaming smile on her face dropped and she leaned in closely. "Don't let him in." Both women stayed rooted to the spot, a worried look passing over Cynthia's face as she stared. "Who?" I asked, eyes darting between the two. "You'll know," Cynthia said before taking her wife's hand. The woman gingerly stepped off my porch and walked across my lawn to the house next door. I sighed, making a note to put up a fence and a gate later when I had time. Before I could shut the door, I caught movement across the street. On the house directly across from mine was an old woman leaning in a rocking chair. A smoking cigarette hung from her lips. There was a cold, hard glare in her eyes as she regarded me. I waved at her, mainly out of politeness. She nodded briefly, her only reply, and then I shut the door. I was arranging my pillows and bed sheets when there was another knock on the door. I sighed, walked downstairs and opened it. 3 children with bored expressions were standing on the porch, shifting from side to side. Each one was holding a pastry dish covered in tinselfoil. "Hi," said the middle one, a boy about 12 years old. "Our mom told us to give you these." Without asking, the kids marched inside and straight to the table in the dining room, setting the pastry dishes on it. I blinked, stunned at this new development. Whoa, I said, walking quickly to them after a brief moment. "Who said you could just come into my house?" The boy turned to me, startled. "Well, my mom said that we needed to give you these, and since you didn't say no, I thought." "You need to learn to be patient," I answered. "I don't even know what your mom made me." Before they could say anything, I lifted the tinsel off each dish carefully. My eyes widened to find 1 shepherd's pie, 1 chicken pie, and several baked vegetables. Yeah, this is okay. I'll bring the dishes back once I'm finished, okay?" "Our mom said you can keep them," said the boy. "And one more thing." The boy went quiet and glanced at his 2 siblings. They fixed their gaze on me as one, and then spoke in unison. "Don't let him in." Before I could say anything, they turned and they left through the open door. I watched, mystified, as the boy gently closed my door. And then I ran up to the window and I watched them leave. I could not let that happen again. Next time some kids tried to come inside without my asking, I'd call the police. I glanced out the window as they walked away to a house up the street and sighed. Hopefully no one else would stop by. My hopes were dashed instantly when I caught sight of an old man in a bowler and dark suit walking on the pavement suddenly come to a stop. He twirled a fancy cane in one hand while peering up at me through a pair of glasses. I stared back, confused by his attire, when he suddenly smiled, stretched out a hand and gestured for me to come outside with a coaxing finger. I recoiled, as if he was pointing a gun at me. The previous warnings that I had been given rang clearly in my head. Was this the guy that they were talking about? And then I heard the man laugh and he took some casual steps onto my lawn. "It's all right, son," he called out in a warm voice. "I just want to say hi to the new neighbor." I did not want to open my door, even when he came up to the porch and knocked on it. "It's rude to keep someone waiting," he said cheerfully. "Don't be frightened, Sonny. I won't bite. Too hard." And then he laughed, still looking me through the window. I opened it, a thin screen now the only thing between myself and the man. "Could you please leave me alone?" I said. This caught the man by surprise and his face fell. "Oh, why's that? I just wanted to say hi. Let me introduce myself," he said, moving to the window as I regarded him warily. "I am Leroy Rankins, and I live just a few houses down from you, mister." "Gabriel," I answered. "Gabriel Drift." "Drift," Leroy said, blinking up at me. "What kind of surname is that?" "What kind of surname is Rankins?" Leroy blinked in surprise and began laughing, a wide smile revealing slightly yellow teeth. "Oh, I like you, son. You've got wit." "Why are you dressed like that?" I asked, gesturing to Leroy's attire through the screen. "Oh, this getup. Why, I'm the mayor, and a mayor always needs to look his best." He laughed again, mirthful like a child. "The mayor?" I said, eyebrow raised. "You're the mayor." "Indeed I am," Leroy answered. "I make it my business to know everyone who moves into our quaint town of Shirley. I look forward to see you around, Mr. Drift. If you need me, here's my card." He reached a gloved hand into his coat pocket and drew out a white card, before opening my mailbox and dropping it in. "If you have any trouble, including spousal or neighborly, give me a call and I'll sort it out." He winked at me playfully. "One more thing before I go. Don't let him in," I said for him. Leroy beamed. "Ah, I'm not the first one to stop by your place, am I? But that's why you didn't open the door. You think I'm him. Ah, goodness no. You'll know it when you see him." "Who?" I asked. Leroy's face fell, though his smile remained, and he leaned in close to the screen. "You'll know," he answered, and then he tipped his hat and he turned to leave. "Hey," I said, before he could get to the porch steps. He turned to me, eyebrow raised curiously. "One more thing. Can you make sure nobody bothers me for the rest of the day?" Leroy blinked again, like I had just admitted to murdering a child. "Why?" he said. "Everybody loves visitors." "Not me," I muttered under my breath before giving him an answer. "I'm still unpacking and I would prefer not to be interrupted." "Oh," Leroy brightened, smile returning to his face. "I understand. When will you be finished?" "By tomorrow," I replied. "At least." "I see," Leroy answered. "I'll spread the word." and then he turned around and went down the porch steps, though I swear I caught him muttering something about city kids with no manners under his breath. I rolled my eyes, shut the window, and, more as an afterthought, I got Leroy's card. What kind of mayor leaves a card with his number on it? He seemed pleasant enough, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I felt a glare on my back, and then I turned around. Outside the window, I could see the old lady again, still in her rocking chair, eyeing me, this time like a curious little thing she had never seen before. I gave her a wave. Her nod in reply was much more respectful. For the rest of the day, nobody bothered me. By nightfall, I was reclining in my living room, typing a story on my laptop, sipping lemonade from a mug and listening to some ambient sounds on my headphones. It helped me concentrate. My concentration was broken when I heard a car door slam shut outside. I jumped, startled, and I closed my laptop, pulling out my earphones as I stood up from my seat, mug still in hand. The chair was just underneath the window for the porch, and outside, I could see a dense fog had descended. On the other side of the street, I could make out two figures running through the front lawn and up the porch of that old lady's house, who was standing in the open door, beckoning them to come inside. The instant they did, she nearly slammed the door shut, but her head snapped up at the last moment, meeting my gaze. It was like she sensed my unspoken question when she pointed down the street with one bony hand and then shook her head. When she closed the door, I leaned over the chair, peering out the window in the direction that she had pointed. I couldn't see much through the fog. Forecast hadn't mentioned it. The unreliable bastards, but I did hear something faint. The shuffling of feet. I gently set down my mug and I leaned closer, resting my hands on the headrest of the chair. Slowly, underneath one of these street lamps, a hunched figure came into view. The figure paused in front of a house, and then slowly began shuffling across their lawn and to the porch. I watched, ready to call the police as the figure stopped. Faintly, I heard a man's voice. I already had figured out who this figure was. It didn't take a genius to do that. I don't know what I was expecting, but when I heard that man's faint voice, my hair stood on end. Something was off about it. The man waited in front of the house for at least a minute, and then he slowly shuffled back across the lawn and onto the pavement, resuming his walk. He stopped at the next house and did the same. Again, his voice was faint, but loud enough that I thought I could make out some words. Just enough to understand what he was asking.
Come in.
He was asking to come inside. And yet, what struck me most about his voice was how empty it sounded. Worse yet, it was an emptiness that felt strangely familiar. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew this wasn't my first encounter with this emptiness. The man shuffled from house to house, asking the same question each time, always waiting exactly a minute before he left, coming closer with every house that he passed. When he was 2 houses down, I was finally able to make out what his empty voice was saying.
May I please come in?
I don't know why, but something about the way he said it caught me off guard. It was like he was pleading almost. The sense of familiarity grew stronger when I realized that, after a minute passes, he slowly shuffled to the house next to mine. Under the street lamp obscured by the dense fog, I could make out what looked like a trench coat and the outline of an overgrown head of hair which matched his beard. The man shuffled slowly, almost respectfully, to the next door house and stopped in on the front porch. He spoke.
May I come in?
I waited with bated breath, knowing that I was next. I watched as the man stood stock still, face obscured by the fog, his hands clasped in front of him, And then after about 30 seconds, he said something else, voice fainter than before.
Please. I'm cold and hungry.
There is a dull pain in his voice, the kind repeated disappointment brings. No response. And then he moved. I sprang back instantly, away from the window and out of sight. I could hear his unstable feet shuffling closer, and when they stopped, I felt a pit form on my stomach. And then they resumed, crunching grass underfoot until they stopped again.
May I come in?
His voice, now that I could hear it, wasn't as faint anymore. If anything, he sounded vaguely pitiful. I say vaguely because his tone was dull as it pleaded, like he had given up, you could say. I knew I only had to wait a minute, but hearing his voice, I suddenly realized why the emptiness was so familiar to me. It knew how I felt. Cautiously, terrified but too curious for my own good, I crept up to the peephole and I looked out. In whatever meager light was provided, I could see filthy hair which hadn't been cut in years, sticks and dead leaves hanging from it like clothes on a line. His beard was a tangled mess that reached his stomach, shaggy and brown, with similar ornaments in his hair. His leather trench coat was patchwork, various pieces of leather all stitched together, the different shades providing a sharp contrast with each other. I could just make out his eyes, just briefly. I had seen those eyes before. Whenever I looked in the mirror, I saw those same eyes staring back at me.
Please.
The man didn't plead, he begged.
I'm cold and hungry.
Something white glistened at the corner of his eyes. My muscles were tense, and I didn't realize my hand had moved until I felt it on the door. I grimaced, knowing that I shouldn't let him in. I knew some people were doubtless watching, like all nosy neighbors do. But I knew how he felt. Hearing his voice, seeing his eyes, I couldn't help but feel not only pity, but sympathy for him, maybe even kinship. I wasn't sure if I could live with myself if I turned him away, but part of me was screaming not to let him in. And then I had an idea. Just as the man began to turn away, quietly sighing, I opened the door, slowly, peeking my head around the corner. I could see the man had frozen. His empty gaze met mine, and was filled with surprise. He blinked, shuffling back slightly. You said you're hungry, right? I asked quietly. The man nodded slowly.
And cold.
Wait here, I said, but don't come in my porch until I say so. When the man nodded, I gently closed the door and then turned around. The shepherd's pie was still on the table, cold, but it was easy to cut a piece, put it on a plate and warm it up. Next, I rummaged through my closet for an old coat. It wasn't hard, I often kept my old coats. I'm a bit sentimental. The microwave's ping told me the shepherd's pie was ready. When I came back to the door, plate and fork in one hand, coat slung over the other, I half expected the man to have already left. All the same, I wasn't surprised to find he was still waiting. He hadn't moved an inch. Cautiously opening the door, I put the plate on the porch first, and then carefully threw the coat to him. He didn't catch it. More have grabbed it after it collided with his body. You can come on the porch, I told him. But please, leave the plate and fork.
I will.
The man said and then smiled. His teeth was riddled with black cavities and overgrown gums, but the warmness of his grin stunned me. It wasn't the kind of cheery playfulness Leroy had worn. It was sincere, like the man had a reason to keep on living again. I closed the door and I took a seat behind the window, listening as he shuffled up the porch steps. The clink of the fork and the desperate chewing that followed didn't catch me by surprise. But when I heard quiet sobs and low moans, I almost looked out to see what he was doing. Almost. When the fork stopped clinking against the plate, the shuffling was back, moving away from my door and back across my lawn. But it was lighter now, like a weight had been lifted off of it. I could still hear the sobs and moans, but they weren't sad. Quite the opposite. It was an hour before I opened the door and I retrieved the plate and fork. Both were covered in clear droplets of water. I touched one and I tasted it. It was salty. I grimaced and I spat onto the pavement out of disgust at what I had just done. Thank God the man hadn't seen me do that. And then I felt a piercing stare on me, and I looked across the street. The old woman was glaring at me through her window, one hand holding back curtains while the other had a corded phone to her ear. I gave her a small wave. She grimaced, pulling back her lips like a dog had just shit on her lawn, and then closed the curtain. Nothing happened for the rest of the night, and I didn't hear the man again. I thought he would have just tried the other side of the street, and just thought that I was wrong. The first thing I did when I woke up was go downstairs for breakfast, until there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find the boy from yesterday, glaring at me with suspicious eyes, but that didn't shock me. It was the old cold in his hands. "Here," he said, thrusting it out to me, "and my mom wants her pastry dishes back." He unceremoniously dropped the coat onto the threshold, and then turned around and sped off, running down the street. I watched him leave, mouth agape, before looking back to the old coat. There was a piece of folded paper sticking out of one of the pockets. I immediately pulled it out and unfolded it. What I saw made my heart skip a beat. "This belongs to you, son. I wouldn't go handing it off to strangers. It wasn't easy getting it back. Don't lose it again, or I might not be able to return it. And remember, don't let him in. We'll be watching. Yours, LR."